He's mentally unstable. My husband didn't whisper it. He didn't imply it. He shouted it. Right there, in open court. The word unstable echoed off the wooden panels like a gunshot. Conversations in the gallery died mid-breath. Someone actually gasped. The judge looked up slowly, the way people do when they're deciding whether something is tragic or ridiculous. And I just stood there. My name is Elena Hart, and that was the moment I realized I wasn't fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my name. 5 years of marriage. No kids. No messy custody battle. No dramatic property war. Just character assassination, served in a tailored suit with rehearsed outrage. My husband, Daniel, stood tall beside his attorney, hand resting on the table like he'd already won. His mother rose next, dramatic as ever, pointing a trembling finger at me. Letting this woman into our family was the biggest mistake of my life. Not anger, not even hatred, regret. As if I had contaminated something sacred. And I stayed silent. Because the truth? I had once trusted him with my weakest chapter. 3 years ago, after my father died unexpectedly, I spiraled. Grief hollowed me out. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I went to therapy. I fought my way back to myself. I told Daniel everything back then. The panic attacks. The guilt. The days I didn't want to get out of bed. We used to call that honesty. Now he was calling it instability. He claimed I was emotionally erratic, dangerous, unpredictable. The judge flipped through the file, then looked at him carefully. Do you truly not understand who she is? The entire room shifted. Daniel blinked. Excuse me? The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I've seen this pattern before, she said calmly. A partner confides their pain. The other stores it away. Later, it becomes a weapon. Daniel's attorney stiffened. Your Honor, You should have looked closer, she cut in. Then her eyes moved to me. Miss Hart, I remember the Westfield hearing. You testified when no one else would. Daniel's confidence cracked. Years ago, I had volunteered as an advocate in a domestic abuse case. I showed up every single day to support a woman who was too afraid to speak alone. I didn't want attention. I just didn't want her to feel abandoned. Same courthouse. Different seat. Back then, I was there to defend someone else. Now, I was the accused. Daniel shifted beside his lawyer, whispering urgently. His mother's posture stiffened. I didn't mean it like that. Daniel tried quickly. She's just fragile. Fragile. I almost laughed. I hadn't come to court to prove I was stable. I came prepared. Medical clearance from my therapist. Character letters from former colleagues. Documentation of Daniel's controlling behavior. And something else. Something he didn't know I had. Because when someone decides to rewrite your life, you better hope you kept receipts. The morning after that hearing, I received an email from his attorney's office. Routine exhibit summary. But buried 2 pages deep in scanned attachments was a file they never meant to send. A PDF. Time-stamped. Handwritten notes converted from Daniel's phone. The title made my stomach go still. Divorce Strategy Mental Fitness Angle. I opened it, and as I read his words, his plan, my heartbreak transformed into something colder. Calculated steps. Leverage her therapy history. Mention emotional volatility in front of mutual friends. Suggest instability, but not enough for psych evaluation. Push narrative early, so she folds. He always backs down when pressured. I stared at that line for a long time. He always backs down. I forwarded the document to my lawyer without commentary. Then I printed it, placed it in an envelope, and personally delivered it to the court clerk with one short note. Submitted for review regarding character allegations. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to wait. Because the loudest people in the room are rarely the ones holding the truth. And when we walked back into that courtroom the next week, everything felt different. Everything felt different the next time we walked into that courtroom. The air wasn't dramatic anymore. It was tight. Daniel didn't look at me when he took his seat. His jaw was clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. His attorney kept flipping through his binder like he was searching for something that had suddenly disappeared. The judge entered. calm, controlled, but colder than before. This court has reviewed supplemental material submitted after the last hearing. Daniel's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, may I ask what? You may sit down. He sat. My pulse stayed steady. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I was done being afraid. The judge adjusted her glasses. Before we proceed, I will be calling a character witness. Daniel's head snapped toward his attorney. That wasn't part of their script. The door opened behind us, and when I saw who walked in, something inside me softened. Maya Reynolds. 3 years ago, she had been the woman sitting in a corner of this same courthouse, hands shaking, bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. I had met her through a volunteer network. I didn't know her well. I just showed up. Every day. 2-hour drives. No spotlight. No speeches. Just presence. Now she stood taller, confident, a counselor for women rebuilding their lives after abuse. She walked past Daniel without looking at him and took the stand. Maya, the judge said gently, can you speak to Ms. Hart's character and stability under stress? Maya didn't hesitate. When I was too terrified to testify against my husband, Elena sat beside me. She never once made it about herself. She didn't try to control the story. She just told the truth. And she showed up every single day even when it was inconvenient and uncomfortable. Daniel shifted in his chair. She was calm, Maya continued. Measured. Strong. I've worked with hundreds of survivors since then. I've seen unstable. I've seen manipulative. Elena is neither. Silence. The kind that doesn't need to be dramatic. Just heavy. Daniel's attorney leaned in, whispering aggressively. Daniel shook his head slightly, like he didn't know which lie to commit to next. The judge folded her hands. In light of the submitted journal entry and this testimony, the court will reconsider its initial posture regarding the petitioner's claims of mental instability. There it was. Not loud. Not explosive. Just precise. Daniel's strategy didn't collapse in flames. It dissolved. The judge turned to him. Mr. Hart, would you like to clarify your previous statements? He stood slowly, smoothing his tie. That familiar charm sliding into place. I never meant to hurt her, he began. Things between us were falling apart. I was scared. I thought if I didn't protect myself. By accusing your wife of mental instability, the judge asked. I panicked. He tried for emotion. A crack in his voice. A practiced pause. But panic doesn't write bullet point strategies. I rose from my seat. Not angry. Not shaking. Just finished. Your Honor, I said evenly. I'd like to submit Exhibit 18. The bailiff took the envelope from my hands. Inside was another email chain. Between Daniel and a friend. Subject line. How to frame it carefully. They had discussed wording. How to imply emotional breakdown without triggering court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. How to mention my father's death for sympathy leverage. How to plant concern among mutual friends before filing. The judge read silently for nearly a full minute. Daniel didn't look at me. He couldn't. Thank you, Ms. Hart. The judge said at last. She closed the file gently. This court will adjourn until final ruling next week. The gavel struck. Daniel walked out first this time. No triumphant stride. No whispered confidence. Just fast. In the hallway, he finally stopped. You set me up, he muttered under his breath. I met his eyes for the first time in weeks. No, I said quietly. You just assumed I wouldn't stand up. His mother tried to glare at me, but even she looked unsure now. Because here's the thing about life. We sat. The courtroom settled into that fragile silence that only exists right before something permanent is said. The judge reviewed the file one last time. Every page, every exhibit, every word Daniel had written when he thought I would never see it. When she finally looked up, her voice was steady, deliberate. This court has reviewed all submitted materials, including journal entries, digital correspondence, sworn testimony, and character statements. Daniel swallowed. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds clear and convincing proof of premeditated misrepresentation of the respondent's mental health with the intent to manipulate legal proceedings and public perception. The words didn't explode. They landed. Daniel flinched like they were physical. Accordingly, she continued, all claims for spousal support, shared asset redistribution, and emotional damages filed by the petitioner are denied. His attorney closed his eyes briefly. No objection. There was nothing left to argue. Furthermore, the judge added, the marital residence will remain solely with Ms. Hart. Shared debt claims filed under temporary instability assertions are dismissed. All frozen personal assets will be restored immediately. I didn't move, not even when my chest tightened, not even when Daniel's mother audibly exhaled in disbelief. Then the judge looked directly at him. Courts exist to protect the vulnerable. They also exist to protect truth. Attempting to weaponize mental health undermines both. A pause. This court strongly advises reflection. The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. No dramatic music. No screaming. No collapse. Daniel walked past me in the hallway without a word. His steps were fast, uneven. His mother followed, whispering something urgent I couldn't hear. He didn't look back. For 5 years, I had tried to understand him. In that hallway, I stopped. Later that evening, I opened the final document my attorney emailed me. Final judgment. But at the top, in bold, were words I didn't expect. Restoration of reputation. It wasn't just about the house. Or the money. It was about the record. The official acknowledgement that what had been said about me was not just wrong. It was manufactured. By the following week, things started shifting outside the courtroom too. Daniel's social media accounts went quiet. The inspirational quotes about protecting your peace disappeared. The carefully curated victim narrative faded. Mutual friends began messaging me privately. I didn't know it was like that. He told us you were unstable. I'm sorry. I didn't respond to most of them. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need witnesses anymore. The truth had already done its work. It travels differently than lies. Slower, but heavier. A few days later, I received an email from Maya. I've seen people weaponize vulnerability before, she wrote. What you did in that courtroom, staying steady, letting documentation speak, that takes strength. Attached was a flyer. She was building a non-profit support network for people, men and women, who had been emotionally manipulated through false mental health claims. She asked if I'd consider helping. I closed my laptop and walked through the house. For the first time in months, it felt quiet. The night of the support group meeting, I almost didn't go. I sat in my car outside the community center for a full 5 minutes, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart steady but thoughtful. I wasn't afraid of Daniel anymore. I was afraid of reopening the wound. But then I remembered something important. Silence had once been used against me. Now it was mine to use differently. I walked inside. The room wasn't large. Maybe 20 chairs arranged in a circle. Soft lighting. Coffee in the corner. No cameras. No court reporters. No polished speeches. Just people. Men. Women. Different ages. Same exhaustion in their eyes. When it was my turn, I didn't start with the courtroom. I started with this. My name is Elena, and someone once tried to convince the world that my grief made me unstable. No dramatic pause. Just truth. I told them what I never said out loud during the trial. How shame creeps in slowly. How you start questioning your own memory. How when someone you love repeats a version of you long enough, you begin to wonder if it's real. Daniel hadn't tried to destroy me loudly at first. He did it subtly, correcting my tone in front of friends, calling me too emotional when I disagreed, mentioning my therapy casually in arguments as if it explained everything. It wasn't explosive. It was strategic erosion. And that's the part people don't see. The most dangerous lies, I told the group, aren't the ones screamed in court. They're the ones whispered over dinner until you forget what you sound like. No one interrupted. Some nodded. I explained what changed everything for me. Documentation. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Just records. When he tried to rewrite me, I didn't shout back. I gathered proof. Because truth doesn't panic. After I finished, an older man, maybe late 60s, approached me slowly. His hands trembled slightly when he shook mine. I spent 20 years believing I was the unstable one, he said quietly. Hearing you, I think I wasn't. That stayed with me. Back home that night, I noticed something different again. The house didn't echo anymore. It rested. On the kitchen counter was a small envelope I hadn't opened yet. It had arrived earlier that day from the courthouse. Inside was a simple certificate. Judicial recognition of voluntary advocacy. The judge had remembered what I did years ago for Maya. A handwritten note was paperclipped to it. You stood for others when it was inconvenient. When it was your turn, you stood again. No praise. No exaggeration. Just acknowledgement. I pinned the certificate to the wall near my father's old framed photo. For the first time since the divorce began, I didn't feel defensive. I felt aligned. Daniel tried to bury me with words. But words leave trails. And he left too many. Within weeks, mutual friends stopped mentioning his version of events. The sympathy he had curated dissolved quietly. No public apology. No dramatic confession. Just absence. His narrative collapsed under its own weight. And here's what surprised me most. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. Because winning in court wasn't the real victory. The real victory was this. When someone tried to define me by my lowest season, I refused to accept the definition. I kept going to therapy. I kept volunteering. I kept showing up to rooms that mattered. Not to prove him wrong, but to stay myself. Months later,